Today, instead of doing the Q&A, the satsang, we'll have a conversation with Dr. Suhas because it's a great opportunity to learn from him. Many of you already have learned a lot from him. And so we'll keep exploring this journey together, finally bringing together, the world of spirit, consciousness, to the world of if you want to call it medicine, health, well-being, and so on. So I won't be doing the Q&A today, and tomorrow I'll pick it up. And by the way, that's my last session with you, so just want to thank you for last session this time in this course. So I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity also to rest and share these experiences with you as well. So I'm just putting these slides up which were prepared by Dr. Suhas to give you the way medicine, or the world of medicine, is evolving. So as I look back at my own career, I started as an internist, then I became an endocrinologist, then I went into neuroendocrinology, and that's when I started my interest in mind-body medicine. That was way back in the early 80s, 1980 actually, October 1, 1980. I remember clearly. And so I consider that in my career, era 1 is internal medicine, neuroscience. Era 2 was mind-body medicine. Era 3 is what we call integrative medicine and transition to behavioral medicine. And era 4, which will start next year, is collective awakening, if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is this series of slides was prepared by Dr. Suhas, and there are so many questions here that we ask ourselves every day because we have the opportunity of having him with us. I'm going to ask you, how do you answer these questions, okay?
Well, I'll be happy to do that.
Why are we here?
Well, before we get started, I just want to express my deep gratitude. I feel absolutely honored and humbled in the presence of Deepak because it's been 4 decades of this tireless work that we have seen the shift and the change that we are seeing in mainstream medicine, not only in this country, but worldwide. So let's acknowledge his monumental efforts to make this thing possible.
I should add, by the way, that Suhas and I are what in India we call Guru Bhais, which means brothers in the same spiritual tradition. So both of us, our Guru was Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, and there was some overlap in our time.
Absolutely.
When I was there, relatively senior to Suhas, who was a young physician who had just graduated from Ayurveda.
Absolutely.
So why are we here?
Well, again, going back to the same thing, it's always good to be with you here at Silent Awakenings, and good thing is we can talk whatever we want to talk, and you have muted them, so no questions from their side. So that's always good for us to discuss something different. And if you can go back to the earlier side, probably I think that would be something that I just want to show them, that when he was saying that 40 years ago when he started, like regular medicine, and now we are here where we are talking about spirituality in clinical practice. So this whole quest, who we are, what do we want, and especially when we have disease, sickness, suffering, challenges, obstacles in life, at that time these questions become even more meaningful and relevant. And I think going back to this understanding, especially in medicine and spiritual practice, going back to training physicians and doctors, because in all the ancient traditions in philosophies, these questions were the initial questions: who we are, what is our connection with Mother Nature, what do we want, and where do we want to go, and what kind of life we want to manifest. But we never had that connection in terms of how we practice medicine. So I think the winds of change are clearly visible now, and we can see that. It was earlier thought to be just, even Deepak coined this term mind-body medicine, I would say, and made it really, really popular, and is bringing this connection to mind, body, and spirit medicine to really understand the spiritual connection and the discussion of consciousness in clinical practice in medicine. So we are really understanding how we perceive, how we look at life, and how we can change the way our physiology and the biology responds to everything. So I was looking through everything that he has written over the last 40 years, and this is becoming really, really evident that the new research that is happening is also driven because of some of the striking findings that he has mentioned in many of his writings itself. So moving from just talking about psycho-emotional issues to psychology of well-being and positive psychology, because it's not about diseases anymore, or how do we fix a disease, or what is the cure for which kind of disease or imbalance. It is coming to a stage where we are asking the important question that what would make us healthy, and more importantly, what would make us happy. And I think these questions we had no answers for, but slowly and steadily we are identifying the answers and creating tools. And this is one of the tools, which is a marvelous tool when you go inwards and when you kind of minimize the outward sensory distraction and you are in touch with your own field, with your own state of inner well-being and consciousness. That's when you are able to tap into those things, and you're going to find the answers to many of those questions. So Ayurveda means my initial upbringing and everything is from a classical Vedic tradition, born and brought up in India in a traditional Vedic family itself. So these questions and these answers are assumed as a way of living as such. But as I started traveling in the West, I think this became more and more clear to me that the way the information in the Vedic scripture is structured, I think they address to the main cause of human life much more effectively, and elaborated various sciences from that understanding of who we are and how we live and how we interact with the universe. So every science that has come out from that fundamental understanding that we are an inseparable entity with the universe, whether you talk about yoga, Ayurveda, Sthapatya Veda, Gandharva Veda, all the various different branches of Vedic literature, even the language of Sanskrit, even the grammar of Sanskrit, the Vyakaran that we talk about, all the different various branches of Vedic literature are firmly rooted and grounded in that understanding of the creation. And how can we use some objective tools to probably shift and change how we are leading our life. So these are very practical sciences. They are all meant for uplifting us, helping us to live a healthy, happy life, and still keeping an eye on doing something which is much more productive in allowing ourselves to constantly move towards elevated or higher states of awareness and consciousness.
I just like to, as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I've tried to do, I don't know how successfully or not, because I have my foot in both worlds. Yeah. This world that you come from, Maharishi and myself, and then the other world of mechanistic science, if that's what we can call it. So, not that mechanistic science there's anything wrong with it, but it's very effective for acute illness. I don't think if you have a full-blown pneumonia, you should avoid an antibiotic. Yeah. Or if you break your leg, you should see an orthopedic surgeon. Or you have acute appendicitis, probably needs to be out. So, there's a role for mechanistic medicine. But what I would call this area that we are exploring is Qualia medicine. So while the West focused on measurement of experience, because that's what we do measure. We measure, indirectly or directly, we are measuring experience.
That's what Maya means, actually. Measurements, matra. Matra, Maya.
Maya, they heard that yesterday.
Yeah.
So we are measuring experience, but Qualia means quality. And what this different science is doing is we're actually understanding quality of life. And now there's an ability to merge the two. You can have a measurement for almost everything, every experience.
And I think this whole science of objectivity, understanding the form and moving toward the formless understanding of being devoid of the qualities. The terms that are classically used in Vedic tradition is meeting the life at the saguna level, which is full of qualities, understanding the qualias, and slowly move beyond the impact of the qualities or the state of nirguna, as they call it. So I think this
Can everyone hear? Yes? Okay. Saguna means with qualities, the form.
And nirguna.
Nirguna means without qualities, formless. The two go together.
And I think this is the age-old debate within the Vedic tradition of Dvaita, of the duality, where you understand this aspect of the form and move toward the formless understanding of the world itself. So going back to the understanding of Ayurveda is understanding and respecting the qualities is the first point, where you understand whatever the qualities are in matter and selecting the right kind of qualities to bring in the opposite qualities to counterbalance whatever is happening. If it is hot, you bring in something cooling. If it is heavy, you bring in something light. So you use the qualias and qualities as a balancing mechanism, but slowly you start transcending the impact of those qualities with your realization. Because whether we look at our human life, we are blessed or cursed with how we respond to the qualities all the time. And those qualitative understanding, and I think Ayurveda is a great template, because the very beginning understanding of Ayurveda itself is how consciousness gives rise to Prakriti, which is the form or the matter and the energy that is embedded together, and how the form of life gets created. And we are stuck with responding to various qualities as it is happening. So as we are evolving or transcending, we are controlling or regulating our senses, we are transcending the diversity of life and moving towards unity consciousness, the impact of those qualities become less and less intense.
Can we also say that the formless aspect of existence, because existence is both inform and formless, but the formless aspect of existence is imbued with every quality that we see in the world of form as archetype possibility. So the formless actually has a structure. We cannot see the structure, but because it's formless, but the structure is also invisible and embedded in the formless. Otherwise, whatever we see, there's also a formless structure to this.
Yeah. And I think the way we perceive the qualities of the form that is coming out of the formless is different for different individuals, different species, different network of everything. So even though the age-old saying is, having created the creation, the creator entered within the creation. And the entrance of the creator within the creation is perceived very differently than every species as it is.
It's literally infinite.
Yeah, and those infinite possibilities, as you like to say, all coexisting together, because the same thing will be tapped differently. So the formless is the real understanding of what the form is. And the form, to a certain extent, we may call it as illusion, but it is real to the given person who is watching it, who is observing it, who is interacting with it. And that's what is very, very real to that. But it could be absolutely the same reality to someone else or something else that is experiencing that. And those confinements, I would say, with our sensory apparatus, with every species that they have, is very true to a greater extent. And that pool or the ocean or the field of consciousness from where everything else emerges has so many different shapes and forms. And I think this is exactly the very essence of Vedanta itself, that you talk about time and the division of the time and the past, present, and future, and the timeless understanding of being, which is omnipotent and omniscient and omnipresent, and that doesn't shift or go anywhere else. And
which we these days say is non-local. Omnipotence means infinite energy everywhere. Omniscience means infinite knowledge and information everywhere. What's the third thing? Omnipresent means so omniscience is information and knowledge everywhere. Omnipresence is literally the same presence in different forms everywhere.
So the energy cannot be created or destroyed, it just changes shape and form.
So we could talk about this for the next 10 years. Let's move on. This is a very interesting area to talk about, and we'll maybe come back to it. But let's move on with your slides.
Yeah. So I think
there's a lot of wealth here.
One interesting thing that I wanted to discuss with Deepak, and maybe I have a couple of questions for him, is the spirituality in medicine, and why don't we have that right now, and what is the need of that, and how can we create and maybe train the new creed of physicians that are coming to really understand the core value of human existence, because that would minimize how we create diseases, which is based upon wellness education. And these are some of the questions that Ayurveda has asked and answered even before it started talking about diseases. It's about the science of immortality, about the science of our connection with Mother Nature itself. That exactly who am I and what my purpose is, and how am I never born and never gone. The very motto of Ayurveda is Ayurvedo Amritanam. It's the science for immortality, which simply means that even at that time they were fully aware that the physical body, it may assume a shape or a form up to a certain thing, but it is going to reconvert itself into the basic element. It is created by basic element. It is being fed and nourished by the basic element, and it will be merging back into the basic element. So that was the very fundamental understanding of Ayurveda itself. So dispelling that fear of death, dispelling that ignorance was the very philosophical foundation of Ayurveda itself. And every healer, every Vaidya, every physician should be able to practice with this fundamental understanding, so that the challenges in life can be dispelled with this cosmic understanding that it's all transient, it's not real, or something like that. And I think if we can counsel our patients, our clients, in their most difficult situations, even in diseases and at times, I think it will minimize a lot of challenges that people face.
So the phrase Ayurveda Amritanam means Ayurveda is for immortality. For understanding your own immortal nature. That's the ultimate purpose.
And I think Deepak was probably the first one started talking about the quantum mechanical body and how we are just at a subatomic, atomic level. It's constantly shifting and changing without our body even knowing and understanding. It's not a frozen sculpture, but it's a constant energy information field that is constantly interacting with everything else. And that was a very poetic awakening to the mainstream science, and I think it has slowly shifted how the medicine is being seen, practiced, and very soon we will actually see the influx of spiritual healing or the cosmic understanding of our human life, and how we can integrate that into so-called objective sciences, because even those objective sciences are there, but the purpose of any science of anything is to improve the quality of human life as such. And if we can dispel that, how do I lead my life? Because that is the kind of missing education that we have. Nobody actually teaches us how to live life. Nobody actually teaches us how to use our senses in a balanced way, or how do I organize something that I want to manifest? How do I regulate my priorities, and who is supposed to guide me and counsel me, and the initial upbringing, the parenting skills and everything. And this whole science is up for a grab, I would say, at this stage where we are learning this even more strongly about the intrauterine atmosphere and what goes on during those times, and how your mind gets created even before you are born. And your decision making, your response to given situation, your upbringing in the first few years of your childhood, all of those things. Parents as the real life coach, parents as the real models for them to really guide them.
And even though all of that determines probabilities, we have the freedom to change that.
That's correct. And it's not set in stone, but if at all, it can be structured in a way where we understand the importance, the qualities, and the value of it. I think it'll minimize a lot of challenges down the road itself. So the guidance that we need at an earlier stage in life, which is very important. And in my clinical practice, I see quite a few patients, and at that stage, when you have your backs to the wall and you are suffering from a disease, that's when you ask the question that why me, and what did I do wrong to have this? And many of the challenges which are very physical in nature are actually coming from some of the difficulties that they are experiencing, maybe in their relationship, or what they call it as spiritual issues, which are mimicking in terms of physical symptoms as such. And as a doctor, as a healer, you end up in sitting with them, telling them, guiding them, counseling them to help them understand the matrix of human life. And there's no religion here. You completely transcend whatever culture they are having, and you're talking to each other as a human being. So I've been practicing here for 25 years. So my upbringing or anything doesn't really come into this discussion at all, because it is so clean, simple, secular, I would say, where you're able to transcend that and help them understand to slowly rise above that. And this whole aspect of integrating all of this thing together in a standard medical session is something which will see a lot of spirituality happening in medicine itself. So it used to be like that, and I have another interesting slide where when I was researching some of these things, up to about 17 or 18th century, it was still the licenses for the doctors were issued by the churches, and even revocation of their licenses was done by the churches. So about just 200 years ago, it was practiced into a very religious kind of a setting, to understand that this work is a noble profession. And the nurses, the sisters, you go to the house of the god and how they are taken care, the nursing homes, everything about just 200 years ago was done at that time. And maybe it's last 100, 150 years, we are slowly separating from this whole understanding, and in the name of creating something secular medicine, we have disconnected ourselves from the universal principle which governs and constructs this whole functioning of the universe. And I think we are probably slowly going back to that understanding that we have to find our reconnection with that, our cosmic identity.
So before we go into the next slide, this conversation triggers some ideas. We have 2 questionnaires that should be distributed to everyone. One is called the Perceived Stress Scale. The second is the Non-Duality Questionnaire, which have become very standard. Punacha will give you access to them, but can everybody have access to them? So the first question is Perceived Stress Scale. It's very standard, and you might want to evaluate your own level of stress now and maybe 6 months later. This is part of a research project that we're doing, so I would encourage you to do that. The second is called the non-duality score or questionnaire, which we just recently published in a Journal of Integrative Medicine, has become the most cited paper right now in non-duality. You're perfect to do that questionnaire now in 6 months, and we should keep doing this. So it's a way of objectively quantifying your progress. So this should be at every course, Renee, from now on, okay? Because everybody's participating. They want to know how they're doing, and we want to know, and we also want to know how we can improve. So every course should have these two questionnaires. That was number one. Second, it's a digression. Traditionally, we separate Ayurveda and Vedanta from yoga, but of course we bring it all together, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And when we talk about yoga, we talk about the 8 limbs of yoga, Patanjali, classic sequence, niyama, yama, pratyahara, pranayam, yogasana, dharana, dhyan, samadhi. Recently, I've become very interested in, not so recently, but last few years, very interested in the tantric aspects of yoga, and have had access to a lot of experts in the tantra and yoga. And they also, of course, subscribe to the 8 limbs of yoga, but they come from a very different angle, which I want to ask you about. So they say the 4 padas of padas, which means path, right? Or pillars or whatever. They sequence them in the following way. So they start with samadhi. That's number 1. Then second, they say sadhana. The third, they say vibhuti. And fourth is kaivalya. Yeah. Let's go over this sequence. It's fascinating to me because this is almost a top-down approach, right? And it's very enticing. Please explain these. I could explain, but you'll do a better job. So start with this sequence.
Well, I think what Deepak is referring is the 4 divisions within the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, as called as the 4 padas or 4 chapters within the 196 sutras of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And Samadhi Pad, Sadhan Pad, Vibhuti Pad, and Kaivalya Pad. So
in that sequence?
In that sequence. And it actually talks about initially as the tools for you to... Sadhan means a vehicle or a mode or a tool, what you need to do in order to get there.
Spiritual practice.
Spiritual path, the requisites or the tools.
But that's number 2. But you're starting with samadhi.
Yeah, you start with samadhi, and that will enable you to get and devise the right kind of tools to have the experience within the Vibhuti Pada itself. So even I remember when Maharishi started teaching meditation, and he was initiating everyone with meditation itself, there was a discussion whether we are giving them the samadhi experience and people are transcending, and ideally they should be practicing yamas, which are the rules of behavior and conduct and things like that. Then you should do the niyamas to follow certain things. Then they should create a nice and lean and yogic body with asana, and they should get rid of the sukshma malas or the fine impurities with pranayama, and then make them ready to do the meditation or samadhi aspect. And he used to say that when people start meditating, they will automatically start following yama. They will automatically start doing niyama. They will make yoga as a part of their daily life. They will make pranayama as a part of daily life. So the 8 limbs are not in a sequential order. You go from top to bottom or bottom to top. It's like pulling a chair to you. You pull one chair to you and the whole chair comes to you at times. So with the experience of samadhi, with the experience of transcendence, when you are able to tap into something bigger, better, and greater than yourself, which is the fourth state of consciousness at the samadhi level, you are able to devise the appropriate tools for you to actually refine those experiences and take it to the next level, which is more of a vibhuti path. Vibhuti is more of a sense of intuition or heightened awareness or having these supernatural powers, as you call it, to probably clairaudience, clairvoyance, to experience those things. And even those are considered to be a little bit distractions to the path of your own evolution if you really want to reach to the state of non-attachment, which is kaivalya, which is the state of vairagya or the state of detachment.
Freedom.
Freedom, absolutely. Freedom from that. So I think this is an interesting technology, you would say, to actually allow yourselves to take to that level where it kind of entices you with this greater sense of awareness. And there's an interesting sutra in Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It says that Siddhi margena labhate nana padma sambhava. Means it's as if that when you are in that state of siddhi or sense of heightened awareness or some supernatural powers, they are distracting you from your path at times. And a real yogi will be able to walk past those and attain to their state
but
of...
they are a validation of infinite possibilities, of non-local possibilities, right?
That's the sign that you're on the right track. That's just a byproduct of as you are becoming enlightened, as you're becoming more and more closely synced with that cosmic principle of consciousness through which that field of all possibilities is being recognized through you with your own practice. And those are the signs that when we say about evolution that is happening, your thoughts, your spontaneous fulfillment of desires, your ability to manifest that is something which is happening. But the key is not to get too attached to that and slowly move past those and not allow them to hold you back from your own journey itself.
Growing up in India, we hear this word vibhuti, it's a common name, etc. People put vibhuti, ashes. Yeah. Is vibhuti in a way deconstructing the materialistic constructs that we have embedded ourselves in order to resurrect from the ashes the freedom of kaivalya, which is spontaneous creativity and spontaneous evolution, and what people these days are calling flow states, or timeless being, or lightness of being, all of that.
It's interesting the way you explain this, because vibhuti is almost as if you're connecting yourself with your cosmic dust identity, where the physical structure, what you have, a certain body, a certain form, a certain role or responsibility, is slowly merging, and that avarana, or that coating, and there's again Patanjali quoting prakash avaran kshiyate, where that whole sheath of your identity is crumbling and you are connecting yourselves to something bigger and greater than yourself, which is identifying that pulsating principle that is throughout the universe. And that's when you are actually able to recognize or identify yourself at that level of kaivalya. So vibhuti is a state, and that's many people actually use this term to actually get a blessing from a guru or apply it on your forehead or the area where there are pulsating centers of consciousness, which are the marma points where you apply those things.
What's the exact meaning of vibhuti?
Vibhuti means something which is a greater sense of brilliance or realization, where you are able to transcend the physical limitations of body and experience something much bigger and better than yourself.
What is the exact translation of kaivalya?
Kaivalya means a state of freedom or detachment. Many times these Sanskrit words are so tricky that you have to say a few paragraphs to explain those. But kaivalya is at that stage where you're not bonded by your sensory experience.
You're not bound by your constructs either.
By the constructs or even what you are experiencing through your senses. It is you are connecting yourself with something which is totally beyond the recognition of senses.
So I'm going to reframe the whole thing for them and then correct me where it's wrong. Okay? We start with the highest, which is samadhi, transcendence. Okay? Start with the highest. Start with the assumption that we are infinite possibilities. Take it as an assumption. We are infinite possibilities. And the only thing that's interfering with that is your false identity that we call ego. So far, so good?
Absolutely.
That's step one, samadhi. Step two, sadhana, spiritual practice. Don't think we have to say anything more about that.
Yeah.
Raj Yoga, Karma Yoga, Gyan Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, and everything else that we do. Step three, Vibhuti, is slowly, through understanding and practice, disengaging from false constructs in which we are embedded, that the universe is material and physical reality is the only reality. Can I say that? Is that fair?
It is, because bhuta, the word bhuta is elements, isn't it? We call it Pancha Mahabhuta or something, which is the objective reality of the physical structure of the body as well as the universe.
Deconstruct.
So you understand the construction and deconstruct from there.
That's Vibhuti. And finally, Kaivalya, freedom from karma, and spontaneous creativity, spontaneous evolution, spontaneous fulfillment of desire, spontaneous joy, flow, peak experiences, transcendence, lightness of being, all these states that people are now talking about in almost every culture. That would be Kaivalya, the lightness of being, the freedom to create what you want, not being bound by any construct, whether it's personal or collective or cultural or religious or whatever. You know, in Kaivalya, you become the creator of reality.
And the biggest point that you made is the karma that you brought with you from the previous lifetimes is being cleansed and purified at that level, where you're not stuck with where you're coming and where you're going. So it is evolving to that level of true freedom, where you're not bound by the previous lifetimes or future lifetimes.
And this is why we are here. This is the purpose of our existence. This is the roadmap.
Yeah, and it sounds very complicated, but I think
just infinite possibilities, spiritual practice, disengaging from constructs that we are embedded in based on physical interpretation of the world, freedom.
Yeah, and as I said, that the trickiest part is we are still using our own senses to free ourselves up. So that is sometimes can be challenging, as I say, because we all would like to move towards our journey towards enlightenment, but the way we will use our mind, the way we will use our intellect, the way we will make our decisions, the way we will find freedom, emotional freedom from whatever entanglement that we are born and raised with is a work in progress. And experience like this, that's why the very first quote from Patanjali was Anushasana, is discipline. So you are disciplined enough to practice meditation or practice a disciplined life to be on that path to free yourself or to liberate yourself.
We should continue.
So I think one of the things that I wanted to ask Deepak was how soon we can experience some of this philosophical understanding of human life in clinical medicine, in real way where we can actually see that this dialogue is happening in hospitals, in settings, not as end-of-life discussions in hospice and trying to do that, but at a very young age, at an early age, how to become healthy, how to become happy, and how to prevent the onslaught of diseases.
The way I think of it is a baseline state, which in medicine we call homeostasis, is self-regulation. Homeostasis is dynamic non-change in the midst of change, is fundamental. And is prior to all entropy. Self-regulation is prior to all entropy. As soon as thought arises, an interpretation of perceptual experience arises, and perceptual experience is learned, then the perfect dynamism, perfect equilibrium, zero entropy starts to express itself as entropy, from zero entropy. The extreme end of that is stress, what we call stress, a feeling of being threatened all the time, which even in very advanced people, there's some existential anxiety, death, fear of death, old age, infirmity, which ultimately does, in fact, manifest as that, because as humans, we know that's the end of this journey. So this is zero entropy, pure being, and then feeling, thinking, speaking, doing, and getting caught up in the web of karma is the other extreme. In between is where we are, is the life journey. And so our goal in medicine should always be to restore homeostasis. So now we can term it in many ways. You know, this is inflammation, this is heart disease, cancer, whatever. Those are different, diverse aspects of the inflammatory, entropic journey. On the other hand is homeostasis. And where our life journey is a Qualia program that starts with pure consciousness, generation of Qualia, which in the usual life journey, in childhood you're intoxicated with every experience. Then you start slowly getting jaded. As you get older, you're more jaded, and more jaded, and more jaded, and finally it's over. This is actually is a Qualia program, right? The Qualias, first there's no Qualia, then there's the burst of these amazingly vivid Qualia and experiences. Then there's the fading of Qualia, and then, of course, there's the absence of Qualia, so you end up where you began, in a state of perfect equilibrium. If we did not interfere with this process, it's a very natural process. But we do interfere with it in every moment of our lives. And what interferes is this ego construct, which finds its place in the default network of the brain, which says there's me and there's everything else. I'm separate. But as soon as that default network starts to quiet down and the ego construct starts to dissipate, it doesn't go away, because it go away, you'd be in Mahasamadhi. If it starts to quieten down, you're moving in the direction of homeostasis. So bringing in this idea of spiritual well-being, because ultimate spirit, that's what the non-duality questionnaire is, by the way, that we are going to give out. Bringing this dimension of spirituality into our practice of medicine is actually a way to restore homeostasis.
Maharshi used to say that people grow old and die because they see
other people growing
other
old and
people
dying.
growing old and
But
dying.
that's from Shankara also said that.
Yeah, and so this
It's a construct, recycling.
Conditioning also, and many times.
Which we are challenging. We're saying, aging can be delayed, aging can be reversed. I'm experimenting with my own self these days.
You are.
But it's an experiment, right? But unless you start with infinite possibilities, you can't even go in that direction.
Yeah. So, it's a good thing to discuss, especially when we talk about mainstream medicine. It's about chronic diseases and death and dying. It's this whole big fear that is even projected bigger and bigger every time. So with the realization and understanding with everything that what we are doing and how people and the collective consciousness, it's not that only people are talking about it or writing about it, but it's the rising in the collective consciousness, which is shifting the awareness that how it is to be seen and practiced properly. And I think we are coming back to the realization about how the individual health can affect the health of the family and the society and the nations and the global health, which is a greater ecosystem. And that's exactly what Patanjali has talked about. So it's not only you're doing yoga for yourself, but whatever you are doing is going to change everything else around it and is going to shift the collective consciousness and the expression of the human life on the planet itself. So I think from individual understanding of health and well-being to the collective well-being and the network that connects with all of that is on the rise, is evolving. And I think what we are seeing through yoga, through Ayurveda, through spiritual understanding and meaning of life, I think we are almost to this new stage of evolution where we are trying to connect all those things, and maybe the social media.
With the end goal of collective awakening.
Collective awakening.
And everything that the modern world has to offer, social media, etc., can be a tool for that.
Yeah. And I have listed few things that we should start, and you have mentioned that in Healing the Self about the pillars, what we should be doing for ourselves. And I think it might be a good idea to just remind ourselves that we don't have to really go back and start doing something too big and too lofty, but going back to understanding that our individual health is going to affect everything else that we are going to do in the universe itself, and slowly freeing ourselves, not letting ourselves too entangled with the drama of life as such, being slightly awakened and have that state of awareness which is not contracted, but it is able to probably embrace the freedom that we want to perceive for ourselves. And I think this emotional health is an important component to how we manage our own health and collective health as such. So our life as we project within ourselves, what we think of us and how we perceive the world through the lens that we create, and how we manifest our outer life and what we manifest in terms of destiny, it's as if that gives us more control and more regulation over everything else that is happening around us. So
okay, so a lot of these principles you have already addressed, but because there are some beautiful phrases here, which a lot of people will not be familiar with. We mentioned Saguna is form, Nirguna is formless. Qualia simply means qualities of experience or qualities of consciousness. Let's explain these beautiful phrases, words. Asatmya Indriyartha.
So these are the root cause of diseases from an Ayurvedic perspective. And they did not talk about impure water or bad food or anything else. They started with improper conjunction of your sensory faculties with their object, where asatmya means incompatible combination.
Asatmya means what?
Incompatible, where you're having a conjunction of your sensory faculty with the sensory object, which is unhealthy. So it is overuse, misuse, abuse, and underuse of your sensory faculties, which starts creating what they call it as destabilization of your intellect and a false construct of ego, which makes you make decisions which are constantly not appropriate or suitable for you. So one of the main reasons Ayurveda actually describes the root cause of diseases is improper conjunction of your sensory faculties with the objects. And if you are overindulging into certain things, it will lead to a lot of imbalances, and it will create destabilization of your intellect. And that mistaken intellect where you are not able to make the right decision, which is suitable for you, what is the right diet for you, what is the right lifestyle for you, and you keep on making mistakes, which are, we call it as mistakes of intellect, which is pragya parad, where your own body is revolting against yourself in making decisions which are not conducive or suitable for you. And then parinama is the factor of time where you are not interacting with the laws of nature around you, which starts creating imbalances into not only your physiology, but everything else around you. Because how we lead our human life and the decision that we make can affect the environment and the forces of nature around us. So from an Ayurvedic perspective, these are the root causes of individual imbalances as well as cosmic challenges, like when we talk about global warming. It's a sign of the collective consciousness shifting and we making certain decisions which is going to pollute the nature and affect us adversely in return as such. So the time can get affected. Many cosmic events are happening because of the collective consciousness itself. So taking care of our senses, making sure that we are managing, regulating our sensory faculties, making sure that our intellect is much more stable. There are three aspects of pragya parad that we talk about. One is dhi, which is your basic intellect. Dhriti is your patience or discipline. And smriti is your ability to recollect the information, what has happened in the past. Smriti means memory. So all of those things, utilizing those tools to really control and regulate your sensory faculties and make the right decisions, which are absolutely suitable for yourself, is the first tool to become healthy and happy as such. Because many times when you abuse many of these sensory faculties, that indulgences ultimately will bring you some kind of sorrow or suffering or misery to the end. So regulating all of those things is the very root cause of psycho-emotional balancing, as well as physiological balancing, as well as creating an influence in your near environment and far environment, the way your mind and body is working.
So let me summarize again. These are three beautiful phrases. The first one, asatmya indriyartha, which literally means inappropriate use of sensory experience. And again, being too simplistic about it, the best, most appropriate use of sensory experience, in my view, in a very simplistic manner, is mindful awareness of sensory experience. This is why we are here this week. Aren't we doing this? It's a vipassana. If you are aware of your sensory experience, even without judging it, the ability to observe sensory experience changes the way you use your senses. What Krishnamurti used to say, the highest intelligence is to observe yourself having an experience without judging yourself. That would be the correction of the misuse of the senses. Pragya parad, the second phrase, which Dr. Suhas explained as the mistake of the intellect. Okay, so what's the fundamental mistake of the intellect? I am here, you are there, I'm separate from you, I'm separate from the universe. Fundamental. Then all those subcategories, right?
Absolutely.
And then the third, parinama, is what occurs as a result of the misuse of the senses and the mistake of the intellect is the entropy and dis-ease and disorder and ultimately disease that over time as a consequence of the above two.
Absolutely, and that affects you as well as everything else around you.
It affects you and everything else around you. That would be beautiful summary. Now you have here Bhagavad Gita and emotional health. So say a couple of words.
I think it's more or less the same thing that is explained in Bhagavad Gita also, where they have simplistically understand the value of some of the emotions, where you talk about anger and greed and jealousy and egotism, which are unhealthy emotions, and cultivating that with positive emotions, how it affects your mind, how it affects your intellect, how it affects your decision making, and how it affects the life that you attract, and how you are more in tune with those positive thoughts and emotions, which are much more aligning yourself with your cosmic identity. And the other fearful emotions, as Deepak summarizes them, one is coming from fear-based and the other is coming from love-based, I guess. So the love-based are more universal love and brotherhood and compassion and joy and equanimity, and those are positive emotions that changes your we talk about the neurochemical behavior, the biochemical behavior, the endocrinological response, but more importantly, it changes what you are going to manifest just because of those thoughts. So in Bhagavad Gita, they have actually given some very, very clear understanding that what can you do in terms of food, in terms of diet, in terms of routine and behavior to actually make your mind to be more sattvic, to be more positive, to be more light, so that you are effortlessly able to control, regulate your senses, and cultivate a discipline which is rather easy.
Okay, so this is very good. On the one extreme are emotions like love, compassion, joy, equanimity, empathy, and the other extreme is fear, anxieties of all kinds, phobias of all kinds, anger, hostility, guilt, shame, ultimately depression. And so one set moves you in the direction of unity consciousness, the other set moves you away into separation. And what you said right now is very interesting, that Ayurveda even says you can change these emotions by following certain lifestyle rituals, but paying attention to diet. Now, why I find this very interesting is that we know that, food and the microbiome and all this inflammation that's happening directly related to the diet, and actually how our gut influences our emotions more than our brain. That 65% or 70% of serotonin is actually made in the gut. And all these other hormones we're talking about that have to do with mood, opiates, serotonin, oxytocin, new ones, anandamide and norepinephrine, all these neuropeptides, majority of them are in the gut.
In the gut.
So how does food connect it to the microbiome, if you can?
And this is exactly what is explained in Bhagavad Gita. What is the food that you should do to reduce inflammation in the gut? So when you are eating a sattvic diet, that's what is clearly explained. If you are eating hot, spicy, leftover, putrid, canned, dead foods, that's the kind of mind you're going to create. And we know that for sure, that inflamed bodies will have inflamed minds. And they will have violent tendencies in their mind, because this is what you eat, this is what you become. This is the way your mind will think, and this is the way you will make decisions. And we are painfully learning it, that some of these toxic foods that are going into our system is not only altering the microbiome and making our microbiome very inflamed, but it is changing our mindset. It is changing the way we are thinking and making decisions in everything. So,
including the food that comes from animal products, the animals that are fed
Additives,
toxic
preservatives, synthetic chemicals, pesticides, preservatives,
antibiotics,
plastics,
hormones.
antibiotics, hormones. It all
So that's what
goes.
you're consuming, plus the fear of the slaughter.
Fear of the slaughter and the quality of that food, that how longer it stays on the shelf and how much dead it becomes as it stays on the shelf. It is devoid of prana. So one of the divisions in Bhagavad Gita, it says that if you want to be a sattvic person, if you want to experience the lightness of being and the joy and the positive emotions, these are the foods you should eat. And they have a beautiful quotation which says, Yukta ahar viharasya yukta cheshtasya karmasu yukta swapnava bodhasya yogo bhavati dukkha. So you follow an ideal diet and lifestyle. You go to bed at a proper time, you wake up at a proper time, and you do the right things at the right time, and that will alleviate all causes of suffering. So they have given a very simple template, and before we even realize by eating these foods, these are the diseases which are created, they are talking about these are the mindsets that you're going to create in which you are bound to make decisions which are not so good, healthy for you. Because we know that if you're eating unhealthy sweets and too much of sugar, it changes your mentality. It creates this addictive tendencies and behavior in which however you want to shift or change certain things, you cannot, because that's the mind that you have created. And I think this is an age-old concept in Ayurveda, that only not your body is created of the food what you eat, but your mind gets created.
Because both body and mind are modifications of consciousness.
And that's why these pillars that you mentioned in healing the self are so important, because they are the objective templates. And I think Bhagavad Gita is the textbook of life, I would say, because it's given, even though it gives us the overall understanding of consciousness, which is beyond the understanding of our sensory faculties as such, but it still gives us very simple templates to get there, to realize that. And so it creates some very, very practical tools, and healing the self has those 6 pillars that we talk about are the same tools that you talk about. It's about diet, it's about sleep, it's about exercise, it's about emotional health and well-being, it's abiding the laws of nature, doing the right things at the right time with the biological rhythms and circadian medicine. So I think it boils down to something very, very simple and basic. So this is the true template where the boundaries of all these different disciplines of yoga, Ayurveda, everything, and Ayurveda actually even talks about this concept of achar rasayana, which is the behavioral rasayana. So slowly you create a mindset and you start behaving and acting like this, and that is called as a non-material rasayana, which doesn't cost you anything, but just that behavior itself is capable of reversing the aging process. It's normalizing the whole decaying or death or disintegration.
Because what we call normal aging may be a pathological.
It's a pathological term.
Yeah,
and
it's a pathological term.
The longer you restore and maintain a homeostatic balance, the longer you are going to wear off aging process.
Okay, so the first day when everybody got here, I mentioned Ishar, you remember? Ishar, ISHAR online.org. So recently I asked our librarian, I said, can you do a meta-analysis of what's the number one condition of humanity? And can we relate it to inflammation, and ultimately can we even relate it to what's happening in the world? And this is what he found, and it's now part of our library, and please check it out when you want to, isharonline.org. But the number one condition in the world, 99.999% of humanity has it. The 0.001 will be the awakened ones. But it is low-grade anxiety and low-grade depression. Everybody has it. It's part of the human condition. Low-grade anxiety, low-grade depression, as articulated in Western terms, associated with low-grade inflammation, and a precursor to every disease. Okay, so low-grade anxiety and depression is almost like existential, the normal human condition. So then I went and said, do a meta-analysis and find out, is this related to this low-grade inflammation and low-grade anxiety, which has now culminated in the world in what we are seeing? You mentioned climate change, but war, terrorism, and everything else, eco-destruction, extinction of species, we are threatening our own extinction. Can we track it all the way back to existential anxiety, now magnified as racism, bigotry, war, prejudice, climate change? And he just sent me an email a week ago that he has all this data that if put together, in fact, that's how it starts.
In fact, Bhagavad Gita was explained on the battlefield itself. Bhagavad Gita was explained on the battlefield, which was the height of the human emotion and anxiety and depression and anger that resulted to that epic war that happened in Mahabharata. And here it was Lord Krishna explaining that these are the vrittis of your mind which is going to get you to the brink of war and the whole collapse of humanity just because of the way the mind is going to work and not able to tap into something positive or better as positive emotions or something like that.
So, how many people familiar with Bhagavad Gita? A lot of you, of course. Upanishad, the most famous Upanishad of all time. The battlefield of life and the war between the forces of creativity, evolution, what Dr. Suhas calls sattva, creativity, evolution, or joy, love, etc. And then on the other side of the battlefield is our own demons. You know, all these existential demons that arise. And the Bhagavad Gita starts off with the beginning of the battle, and Arjuna and Krishna are together. Krishna is the charioteer. Arjuna is the great warrior. He's the equivalent of Hercules, or you can think of some of the Greek warriors, the great warriors. And in this context, Arjuna represents, in a sense, the divided mind, the ego mind,
confused,
and confusion. And Lord Krishna represents timeless spirit, timeless being. And as the battlefield, they get on this battlefield, Kurukshetra, which is the metaphor of the battle in our own consciousness between the divine and diabolical. You can show that. So there's Krishna and the charioteer, and Arjuna, the warrior. And as soon as the battle is about to begin, Arjuna has a panic attack, basically. And metaphorically says, how can I destroy these enemies? How can I fight these demons? Because they're my own relatives, my own shadows. And so the rest of the Bhagavad Gita, all the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, is the science of yoga. And how do you vanquish your demons through the practice of yoga? All the 4 yogas are beautifully articulated. And basically, Lord Krishna is addressing, go back to the last slide, Lord Krishna is addressing existential human suffering. We've already covered these pillars.
Yeah,
you want to say anything?
No, I don't have to say anything, but I think these are objective templates for you to get started. And I'm going to share 3 steps of what Deepak was saying earlier, is how to get there from this understanding of Vedanta and Bhagavad Gita, especially, where how to move from a tamasic state of awareness to a rajasic to a sattvic state. And maybe we'll go through that steps and discuss anything more if you want to say so.
We can discuss a few things here. I mean, we know a lot about meditation, stress management. We do this all the time. We've talked about yoga. I would like to address item number 1 right now from a spiritual perspective. What is the connection between dream state, deep state, and transcendence? Because
it's an important concept, and we are realizing it how important that is, and it's we almost describe sleep as a state of non-local awareness. And same, going back to Gita, it says Nisha Jagarti Sanyami. So Sanyami is a word that Patanjali used for the state of dharana, dhyan, and samadhi all together. When a person is perfecting a state of dharana, dhyan, and samadhi, in sleep, you are in a state of awakening, and your non-local awareness is interacting with distant realms, which is giving the physical body a deep quality rest and allowing your mind to actually free yourself from this physical body and experience distant realms itself. So in many ways...
And yet there is immense creativity there, immense organization there. It's almost non-local correlation is being consolidated. All the sleep research shows that, during the day we ingest information. At night we edit the information, give it context, meaning, purpose, incorporate it into our life story. So even though we are fast asleep in non-local being, the non-local being is organizing life for you.
It is, and it is creating that processing of the information and manifesting new set of experiences that you're going to manifest through the activity that you have done in an active state of dreaming.
So sleep is the closest spiritual state we can come to, and the most efficient.
There's a beautiful Ayurvedic shloka which comes to my mind. It says, Nidrayatam sukham dukkham pushti karsha balabalam vrishata klibata jnanam ajnanam jivitam nacha. So these are absolutely pairs of...
Translate for everyone.
Yeah, so the things that are dependent upon the sleep is sukha and dukkha. Whether you'll be happy or unhappy depends upon the quality of sleep. Sukham dukkham pushti karsha. Whether you'll be feeling tonified, healthy, strong, and vital, or you'll be feeling weak and fatigued and tired. Okay, pushti karsha. Balabalam, whether you'll have a good physical, mental, and emotional strength, or you'll be having a weakness at a physical level and psycho-emotional level. Vrishata klibata dhyanam, where your ability to be potent and to be vital also depends upon sleep. Jnanam ajnanam, whether your ability to have a sharp cognition, memory, retention, recall, your ability to process information depends upon the quality sleep that you get. Whether you're not able to do that, memory, dementia, cognitive decline also depends upon sleep. Ajnanam jivitam nacha, even your life and death depends upon the quality of sleep you get. So when we were
now,
reading,
by the way, all the research is showing premature death is most frequently associated with chronic insomnia.
And when we were studying all these things, it sounded very poetic and very lofty, but this is becoming hardcore science now.
And one of the goals of evolution, spiritual evolution, is to have that wakefulness in sleep so that you go beyond the fear of death.
That's exactly what it is, because it's almost an experience of death and dying when you are fast asleep like a log, because you wake up, it's as if you're waking up to a new life every morning. And that whole experience of you leaving your body and interacting with different dimensions is kind of practiced every night.
And there's much to say about this in all the Vedic literature, Tibetan literature, ultimately a deeper understanding of lokas, bardos, all of that
and
can happen.
And the funny thing is, not only for human life, but every species.
Every species.
Every species, that they are interacting in this thing. So the term they use for sleep in Vedic tradition is yoga maya. So it's the yoga and the Maya word together, which is used for sleep, as a bhutadhatri, as if she is breastfeeding you every night to nurture you and nourish you for the next day when you're fast asleep.
The common ground of experience in other species is the same, pure awareness, right? The perception is different, the experience is different, the mind is different, the body is different, but the common ground is pure awareness. So every day, all of life at different biological rhythms enters this domain of non-local, timeless being that organizes the life for that particular species of consciousness.
There's an interesting point that I want to bring here, is for meditators, the sleep becomes a very sattvic experience. So your sleep is very light and active for those people who meditate regularly. If you are not a meditator, then the sleep remains a tamasic state where you are ignorant in your sleep to a greater extent. You get the rejuvenation, you recharge your batteries, you do all the immune activity and the physiological function, but it doesn't allow you to attain that dimension of enlightenment in your sleep. So those people who meditate, their sleep becomes much more light, active, and very dynamic.
And still restful.
Very restful. Because even meditation gives us the same experience like sleep, but many times that is when you are meditating and then you are sleeping, then the sleep becomes meditation, and sometimes you sleep during meditation.
Now, the sleep research, by the way, that I'm looking at right now, it says that light sleep is very efficient, number one, in terms of rejuvenation. Number two, the dream state is the rejuvenation of the mind. And in that research, it also shows that those people who have good dream state, good REM sleep, they're not only detoxing the mind, but they don't remember their dreams. So, a lot of people worry about, I don't remember my dreams. The research shows that means you're dreaming well, okay? That you have no anxiety, okay? So if you don't remember your dreams, that's a good sign. And this is REM sleep, and then deep sleep is the body. And so, of course, these days we have a lot of devices. I'm using one right now called Sleep Score, and gives every night, or you can download the app, by the way, Sleep Score, and you can just keep your phone next to you when you sleep, and it basically measures these three aspects of sleep through echo, and it gives you a very beautiful score in the morning, and you can correlate it with how you feel. So all the things that you've said are objectively validated, and sleep is the window to waking up of our consciousness. And these techniques, whether it is recapitulation or yoga nidra, are all little accelerators for this.
No, and I think Ayurveda talks about Trayopastambha, which are the three pillars of the tripod of life, which is diet and sleep and exercise. So,
diet, sleep, exercise, movement.
Because they all feed off each other. And that's what all our books are talking about, actually, because if you're not eating well, you won't be able to sleep properly, and you won't be probably waking up much more easily. You'll be feeling much more dull and heavy. If you're not getting pleasantly tired with physical movement and exercise, you won't get a good night's sleep. And they all feed off each other. So if you correct all the three of them, they actually improve the performance in all the three areas itself. Okay,
so let's go to item. We've touched on nutrition anyway, right now with Sattvic diet and microbiome and gut feelings and all that. But let's go to biological rhythms. As you know, we've been doing a lot of research on grounding. But only recently, and your book is very important part of this literature now, which is
Chronobiology.
Chronobiology. Chronobiology. Last year's Nobel Prize went to basically discovering that clocks, biological clocks we have in our body. Okay, so Dr. Suhas is not this current book, but previous book on your schedule, change your schedule, change your life, is all about biological clocks. And as I said, the Nobel Prize went to the people who are describing biological clocks in our body. Now, most of the biological clocks that science describes today are circadian biological clocks, which is the 24-hour cycle of day and night, which Ayurveda you explain very well, the Vata cycle, the Pitta cycle, the Kapha cycle. But our modern science stops there. Whereas in Ayurveda, the biological clock is a circadian clock because of the earth spinning on its axis. It's a seasonal clock as the earth goes around the sun. It's a lunar clock because of the relationship of the earth, moon, and sun in relationship to each other. It's a tidal clock because of the gravitational effects of the sun and the moon and the stars on the microcosm that we call our body. But science has not gone there.
Even the celestial rhythms about how the other planets influence us. And
the celestial rhythms, which are all built into the systems of Ayurveda, Jyotish rituals, etc. Let's go a little deeper into these four I think biological clocks.
Because what we understand is, whether we like it or not only us as human being, but every species, even a single cellular organism, is affected by these rhythms as the earth is swirling on its own axis and tumbling around sun. So the day and night are created, the effect of sunlight and the effect of moon that is happening on water, which is the biggest body on planet Earth itself, and the oceans and the bodies of water in our body itself. Moon signifies our mind and emotions itself, so there's an effect of that, how it affects on our moods, mind, and emotions itself. The seasons are created because of that transition, how the movement of the earth is happening. And the food that is created in different seasons, the potency of the plants, food, herbs, and everything that is created of life on earth itself is happening just because of that. So sun is often worshipped in Vedic literature as the giver of life. We talk about Gayatri mantra, we talk about sun salutations, we talk about worshipping sun is all about invoking this life, and that's exactly the rhythm that is happening. So we were initially thinking that when we look at sunlight, then something happens to our sensation, how we recognize the light, and then it sends signal to our brain, and then it sends messages everywhere else, and the biochemistry or the body behaves as if it's light out there. But now what we are realizing that we don't have to wait for that brain signal. Even at a cellular level, even at a genetic level, the timers are constantly syncing themselves with the movement of sun, moon, and stars. And you've been talking about that for a very long time, Deepak. But I think now we are realizing at a genetic level, we are carrying out various activities that goes on in the body itself. And that's the reason why it is important to sync what we do with what the body is trying to do at the same time. So if we are carrying out the activity, whether it's food, diet, digestion, sleep, is exactly what the body is trying to do, then we are in sync and in harmony. But if we are not doing those things in proper sync with what the body is trying to do, then we create what we call it as circadian disruption. And that circadian disruption is proving to be one of the main reasons why many of these genetic timers are kind of turned off, and if they remain turned off for a very long time, it will lead to gene mutations, which will lead to behaviors which will create habits which are deeply ingrained and programmed, where you will think that you are not able to sleep in the night, so you have to stay up late in the night, or you are a morning person, you are a late person. But from an Ayurvedic perspective, they have given a very, very simple template from dawn to dusk, Every species in the universe follows those rules. When the light is ending, when the sunlight is coming out, that this is the time that you should be eating. You talk about chrononutrition, you talk about ideal daily routine, talk about ideal seasonal routine, ideal nightly routine, what you should be doing. And those timings of the doshas, those timings of the routines and the rhythms that you're following, they are very much in sync with the body is trying to do. And the discovery of these clock genes, and interestingly they call this as timeless and period 1 and period genes, where even though we are stuck with the construct of time, but they are responding to those things properly, and the body...
Rhythmicities, they're rhythmicities.
Rhythmicities, yeah.
And right. So if there was one word to describe all this, it would be synchronicity. And it's the synchronicity of the entire universe that is also happening in a body, the 100 trillion cells that are doing everything simultaneously, non-local correlation. But then that non-local correlation extends to the entire universe from microcosm to macrocosm. So here's a very interesting something I read recently. There's a bird called the red oak that has migrating habits that go from Canada all the way to Mexico and back with a stopover in Maryland. Okay? And it's a finch. It's not a very big bird. But before it comes to its stopover in Maryland, certain things happen. Its wings and its muscles of the wings enlarge. Its stomach shrinks. Its metabolic rate goes up. And it arrives in Maryland on a full moon night at the exact timing that horseshoe crabs are coming to lay eggs. Okay? From the depths of the ocean where the horseshoe crabs cannot see any light, but they synchronistically come to the surface to lay eggs. And they lay millions of eggs, which provide food for this red oak, which then rejuvenates itself and goes on to Canada. What precision of timing and biological response, the biological response of the bird, the biological response of the horseshoe crabs, and the rhythms of the universe, all orchestrated by nature all the time. So what I'm saying is, our natural state is that. These daily, yeah, you can show that bird, the red knot. This is the bird. And its behavior, the behavior of the horseshoe crabs, the locations are all precisely organized for the migratory habits of the bird and the behavior of the horseshoe crabs. So it's one organism, right? The universe is one organism with these rhythms, and the Ayurvedic rituals are just little accelerators to what is totally natural. If we did not know these rhythms, and we just listen to our body, eat when you're hungry, stop when you're not hungry, sleep as when it's time you feel sleepy, provided you're not using internet, blue light, etc. Then this is all natural to us.
And I think even the biological creativity, which allows them to change their biological shape, size, and form to accommodate the need.
To accommodate each other.
To accommodate each other.
The entire symbiotic relationship of existence.
Yeah. So we for Lord Shiva, who we refer fondly as Mahakala, Mahakala is the pulsating time, where is the devourer of everything, which makes everything happen, which syncs everything seamlessly. So that is often revered as Mahakala, which is the time which is embedded in every living, non-living entity around it, and that is so seamlessly embedded in every cosmic event that is happening. And tapping into that rhythm allowing our body to effortlessly sync with that would be probably the first step towards evolution, because you're literally allowing our biology to behave along with that. The moment we get a little bit lost and get carried away with not responding to those needs, that's when the diseases are going to happen.
And before we move on, biological rhythms grounding, I want to bring two things. One is, of course, grounding, being in touch with nature, barefoot on the earth, touching a tree, all of that helps you sync. And we've talked enough about that. But one of the recent things that's coming up again in the literature is what they call intermittent fasting. And everybody is saying that you should, now I'm not talking Ayurveda, but I want to see Ayurveda and this new movement, that you should eat all your 3 meals within an 8-hour period, all 3 meals if you want to. And Ayurveda has certain guidelines, light breakfast, you can talk about that. But what do you think about this 16-hour fast every night? Say from what time to what time? There's a lot of literature right now.
I think there's a lot of literature, and I don't think this is a new thing from an Ayurvedic perspective. Ayurveda has always talked about eat your food when it's light out there. So whenever it's from sunrise to sunset, that's the only time you can eat whatever you want to eat. So when you're waking up around that time, you should have a lighter breakfast. When the sunlight is nice and tender outside, you should not be eating a big, heavy breakfast. You should be eating a lighter breakfast, because it's the kapha time. You're waking up after 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep. So the Agni is not completely strong as such. So you should be eating a lighter breakfast. When the sun is nice and prominent in the middle of the day, that's when you should consume most of your calories of the day itself, because you are going to be active throughout the day. The srotas are going to be open, the Agni is going to be alive, and you are going to digest most of those calories and convert that into body tissues much more easily. In the evening, when the sun is setting, it's the tender sunlight again, and you should have a lighter dinner. If you're having between 6:30 or 7 or before 7 o'clock, then you should be able to digest it well before you go to sleep. It takes about 3 to 4 hours for you to digest a meal at times. So when you do that, you should never go to sleep with the food still remaining undigested in your system as such. So if you are eating between 8 to 6, all the 3 meals itself, with one being light,
8 a.m. to 6 p.m.
Ideally.
Ideally.
And this is
by the way, I'm doing that right
perfect.
now.
That's great. That's great. It's called a solar nutrition, and Ayurveda used a term called upavasa. Upavasa is breaking the fast. That's why we call it as that.
In English, we say breakfast.
English, we say breakfast,
the fast, yeah.
But breaking the fast, and it's literally you have to fast. If you're eating at 11 o'clock in the night, then you're not breaking the fast.
Okay, so let's move on, because now we've covered all this.
Yeah.
I want to get to, this is beautiful. You want to say anything more?
I think it's something that we have talked about, but again, these are the steps what Deepak already has discussed about it, but I just want to put a little bit of a different Ayurvedic spin to that, is when you are feeling dull, heavy, groggy, toxic, and tired, initially you need to shed the tamas, the heavy, dull quality, the dark, ignorant quality, to something to stimulate you. So just to give you an example, if you're full of ama and you're feeling very dull and heavy, and if I tell you to sit and meditate, you'll be happily sitting and snoring immediately. But the first step, what I should be doing is to give you to eat some more spices, maybe do some exercise, do some sweating, to give you some herbs to open up the srotas, channels, lighten up, and then take you to the next level. So the first step is always increasing the Agni, kindling the fire. Getting rid of ama and increasing Agni is the first step. So if you really want to get back to a healthier, happier lifestyle, trying to move from a tamasic state, you need to move to a rajasic state where you have to make all the moving parts moving. You can join a satsang, you can be positively enthused with a collective group, whether you join an exercise club, you go to group yoga classes. These are all activities that you're doing, or going out for a walk on a nature hike with your friends. eating more spices and herbs, exercising, breathing exercise, especially some warming, stimulating breathing exercise, which will help you lighten up, good quality sleep and rest at a proper time, maybe a good detoxification like panchakarma that you will do. You will inspire yourself reading spiritual books, maybe setting some objective goals that I would like to lose 5 pounds, or I would like to accomplish these goals, or I would like to get rid of some of the symptoms that I'm having. So initially, whenever we see something going on, we will allow ourselves to move from a heavy phase to a rajasic state where we are going to make it more active and dynamic. And once we reach to that stage, when the Agni is open, when everything is moving, then you go to the next step, which is moving from Rajasic to Sattvic state. So if you can go to the next slide, it is increasing Akasha. Now the restored space is there, the srotas are more open, you allow the prana to flow through that system. And what you're doing is you're trying to engage into activities which are going to slow things down. Once you have purified your body, you need to lighten up yourself. You're observing silence, that's exactly what you're doing. You're doing some self-reflective journaling, trying to identify where you are. You're watching your life from a distance. You're learning to transcend your ego. Because up to first step, you're still active, you're still dynamic, you're doing your things. But at this stage, you're pausing, you're watching yourself from a distance, maybe spending time in nature. That's a very good way to slow things down. Helping others, maybe doing some volunteer work, which is a great way to transcend your ego. Maybe be empathetic, feeling other people's pain and suffering. And try to eat sattvic food. So going back to a plant-based diet, initially you clean up your diet and you minimize what we call it as an elimination diet. So you stay away from unwanted alcohol or caffeine or heavy meats or too much of sugar and processed food. And once you have done that, you lighten up even further. You are starting to eat light, you are eating right, and becoming more and more bright. So at this level, you're eating more of a sattvic food. You're eating less. And again, the same research on fasting, those people who eat less live longer and live healthier and happier. So fasting activates a lot of gene activation, which is promoting health and wellness.
Right now, the current word is autophagia. During fasting, 16 hours, the body eats up all the toxins.
Yeah. So we say it gobbles your armor. It gobbles your armor. So eating sattvic food at that stage. So you are eating less and you are consciously reducing the portions and the quantities of the food. And once you are accomplishing this, then you go to the third stage, what we were talking about earlier, which is your journey towards enlightenment. And it's even sattva is still a quality. And you cannot get too attached to you being too pure and too sattvic, and you are the elevated person and everyone else is a lowly creature up there. So you can't be too egoistic with your spiritual discipline as well. So you have to probably let go of that and connect yourself with the awareness of the spirit.
Being aware of being aware.
Yeah. Yeah, and beyond Prakriti, beyond Sattva, which are constantly working and striving to move towards higher states of awareness and consciousness, and slowly merging your individual identity of Jivatma, which is your individual soul or self, to Paramatman, which is your cosmic self or your cosmic consciousness. From individual consciousness to you identify yourself as the total creation in itself.
Let's go back to the kleshas. So, with all of that, these are listed as the 5 kleshas. The word klesha means human suffering. And despite good health, good relationships, everything, lots of money, everything you want, there is still existential suffering. Can we speak about that in the next 5 minutes or
I
so?
think
say
avidya is the very first one, which summarizes everything else.
Avidya means ignorance of reality.
Yeah, and it also comes from the root word vid. Vid means to know, to realize.
Vid is the word for Veda, to know, knowledge. It's actually the German word "ward," which is the origin of the English word "word." So, the word, the knowledge of reality. First there was the word, and the word was made into flesh.
That word was God, and the sound, so it's the akasha, is the essence of creation itself. So that knowingness, the vid, Ayurveda, Veda, comes from that root word vid, means to know, to realize. And that is the first cause of suffering, which kind of summarizes everything else. And once you are into that state of avidya, not knowing your true nature, not knowing your cosmic identity, or you identifying yourself as a fragmented self, and be disconnected from the rest of the creation, and then it makes you cling onto something that is impermanent and that is not yours or mine, and you want to be holding on to something which is very false and which is very illusory, and it creates addiction, it creates possessive behavior, it creates fear of losing something that you call it as yours. It could be health, it could be money, it could be fame, it could be various things. And that fear of losing something which is constantly impermanent, you start identifying yourself with that. And you identify with yourself, with who you are, what you have, and that false, constricted, habitual self that becomes a part, it creates coating on you, which doesn't allow you to really identify or even realize who you are and what you want to manifest. And the more you stay into that, the more fearful you become. And those fear-based thinking, decision-making, and mentality is going to create. And the ultimate fear is the fear of death, which is even many enlightened souls actually realize that toward the fag end of their life, that there's still a little fear which is left. And that fear is of death and dying itself, and losing something what is a creation of the human life. So Patanjali actually described all of these 5 causes are the main causes of suffering. And they all change your mentality, they all destabilize your intellect, they create false creation of ego and identity, and slowly it starts making decisions which doesn't allow you to be on a progressive or proactive path. So exactly what you're doing here is a very powerful thing. You're reorganizing your thoughts, your ideas, your notions about yourself and your life. And that would happen only in utter silence, because, as Deepak likes to say, it's the language of God that you are communicating with, and you're quietening down that internal dialogue, and that from the field of silence, you are able to make changes, and you are in that stage of communication from where your thoughts and intentions can be related to that field where it can make certain things happen. And the key that you're learning while you're doing all of this is slowly becoming dispassionately detached with the outcome of your thoughts and desires and ideas and notions. And as this progress is made constantly, you're becoming more and more abhaya, or fearless as we call, where we are minimizing the fear of losing, or the fear of this constricted awareness and ego that traps us into the challenges and the limitations of life. So I think it's a template of freedom. It's a template for creating and manifesting who you are and how you're going to slowly lighten things up and allow yourselves to find your lighter self, which is several coating down, where you are able to transcend. In other words, we talk about from a grosser physical body, you go to the subtle body, and you get into connection with the causal or the Karan Sharir, through which you have more constant guidance from your higher states of awareness and consciousness itself.
So what I'd like to, that's great. So what I'd like to do now, we have a few minutes. If you can go on YouTube and look for Shankara's hymn, we've played it in the past, okay? Which is a basically deconstruction of human constructs. I mean, he takes it all the way. And yeah, that's the hymn, but find a good, I think that's pretty good. Let's listen to it. You can give the context before he starts playing it.
Yeah, I think this is a very, very beautiful understanding where Shankara is explaining that we are not the physical body, we are not the thoughts, we are not our senses, we are not our desires, we are this
Pure
cosmic
conscious.
self, which is pure state of consciousness and pure state of being, which is completely unshattered and shatterproof, and it is totally it is existing all the time, but it creates this mimicking behavior of human body and human life itself. Constructs of human life and body, so which is the edges that we identify ourselves with. So realization of this, it's very poetic, very beautiful, and it's not your intelligence, it's not your mind, it's not your sensory faculties, being. It's not your physical body, it's not even the experiences that you see, because those experiences are only real to your own eyes, and they can be very different for different individuals. And identifying that state of pure being and pure consciousness is the purpose and ticket to freedom, I would say.
Let's play it. So, having gone through all the constructs of Ayurveda, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas, Sthul Sharir, Sukshma Sharir, Karan Sharir, these are human constructs, but very useful human constructs, till we go beyond all constructs.
From the objective to subjective experience of life.
From the objective to the subjective experience of life. End up with liberation as pure consciousness. Collective awakening. Thank you. Thanks, Dr. Suhas.